Hey guys, and welcome to the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local offshore, nearshore, and inshore fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We got a great fishing report lined up for you guys this week, but first let's hear who's making the show possible. It's time we talked about catching some serious savings. Imagine harnessing the power of the sun to cut your energy bills and having a roof that's built to last. Convert Solar and Roofing specializes in top-notch solar installations and durable roofing solutions that stand up to the toughest elements. Their solar panels are designed to maximize efficiency, and their roofs are built with premium materials to ensure long-lasting protection. Whether you're out on the water or at home, their expert team ensures you're covered. As fellow anglers in the Lower Chesapeake Bay, the team at Convert Solar and Roofing cares about both sustainable living and sustainable fishing. So reel in those savings today and visit www.convert-solar.com or call 757-44-SOLAR. Make your energy and roof as reliable as your favorite fishing lure. Call Convert Solar and Roofing today. Listen up, folks. AFTCO has a new promotion for all Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network listeners. They're now offering a camo sunglasses cleaner cloth with any purchase of AFTCO products. I especially enjoy their hooded sun protection shirts as well as their Seiko fluorocarbon. All you got to do to get your coupon code is text LCBFR to 779-345-2918. Again, just text the letters LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get subscribed to our email list, and we'll send you the promo code via email. All right, y'all. Well, welcome to this week's episode of the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report. I'm your host, Luke Barton, and I'm glad to have y'all with us for this week's show, which is brought to us by the Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network and our sponsors. Each week, we'll be talking with expert charter guides about what they're seeing and catching right here in our local waters. We also promote the use of sustainable fishing practices so we can keep this amazing fishery healthy and thriving for future generations. With that said, let's jump on in and see what's been biting the hook this week. All right, guys. Well, welcome to this offshore report. I'm excited to talk to a new contributor and local captain, local legend, if we will, Captain Russ Castinas on the top-notch sport fishing charters. Captain Russ, welcome to the show. How are we doing?
Oh, very well, very well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure. Look forward to diving in. You guys have been catching some fish this week. I want to hear a fish story. But before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about the top-notch boat, what it's like, and maybe just a little bit about what you guys specialize in.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate that. Yeah, this is actually our sixth boat. I'm quick to tell people I don't own all six at one time. I buy one, work on it for a while, and then we sell it, and then I start another one. So this is the sixth one that my brother and I have built. It's a 58-foot Carolina sport fish boat. So we specialize in sport fishing, both on the ocean front, inshore, but mostly it was designed to go offshore. So targeting tuna, dolphin, and especially marlin. We just love the marlin fish. And so this boat is a very quiet, all state-of-the-art. The boat is made out of kumi plywood and fiberglass inside and out. All the rest of it's foam and fiberglass. So it's very quiet, very stable, very comfortable. Got mezzanine seating in the back, so just love the fish.
Oh, man, I'm looking at a picture of it now. It's a gorgeous boat, and I'm sure being number 6, you probably knew a few things by then as far as what you wanted to do to it when you built it, so I'm sure she is just tricked out to do exactly what you want her to do.
Absolutely. Very, very comfortable to fish, that's for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, especially for those runs out to the canyon and whatnot. You got, I'm sure, AC, bathrooms, kitchen, cook, whatever you need. It's probably all right there inside of it.
Absolutely, including 3 air conditioners.
Praise the Lord for that.
If you're not fishing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure this past couple of days, the air conditioner was probably welcomed. We've had some real heaters here in Virginia Beach lately. So being that it's been hot, I know you guys have been out. What have you been seeing and catching these past couple of days?
I will say thank goodness for most of the boating community that knows that June was a tough month. That's usually our best months for tuna fishing. And it was very, very difficult tuna fishing. The water just wasn't here. We use satellite shots. Other people might do that too. You can go on different services that we subscribe to, and we're looking for the edges of the warm water versus the cold water. So, and normally in June, you might see 64-degree water right up against 68-degree or 70-degree water, and that's where you want to fish because it holds the bait. And so really, those are where your best odds are. And so when we're going tuna fishing, the way we fish, we put lots of lines out. We're clumping them on that too. But I'm trying to get whammed fishing. And what I mean by that is when we get one fish on, we don't stop the boat. We keep going. And the reason we want to do that is when the tuna come up, you want them to just keep coming up. And so you want to get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on if you can. You might not get them all in, but if you're going to catch lots of tuna, it's better to worry about trying to get 3 or 4 out of 6 than it is to catch one at a time. You're not going to catch a lot of tuna if you got to do it one at a time. And this past week, we were finally successful. Finally, some water has moved in, and now the tuna are certainly here. They were here during the tuna tournament too. They just weren't biting very good. You know, you'd have to go right over them. There was a lot of jumping tunas out of the water that he would see, but then by the time you get over there, they've already gone down. And frankly, I think that's because the water warmed up so fast, finally, that now the tuna are really spread out. So this past Monday, we caught tuna all the way from the 300 line all the way up to the 400 line, which is a pretty big, area, anywhere from 50 fathoms out to 125 fathoms.
So for the layperson like myself who maybe just spends more time inshore, the 300, 400 line, what does that mean?
Okay. Well, you hear people on the radio say that too. And now, especially with GPS, if somebody told me they're at 36.4202, I wouldn't know where in the world they are. But in the old days, for the old captains, used to have it's called Loran C, and they would have actually stations on land. And so they would put out what they would call a 2 line, and they would put out what they call as a 4 line, and then wherever they cross, that's where you are. So when I'm saying the 300 line, it is, I can even picture it in my mind, that is about 10 miles south of the Cigar, or if people fish out there, there's a NOAA buoy out there, and that's at about the 200 line. So the 300 is further north by probably about 8 miles.
Okay.
And then the other number, if you hear people out there and you're fishing, that would tell you how deep you are. So around 825 or whatever. But those numbers change because you can't, they don't, lat long are like squared, but the Loran C numbers go at an angle. And so if somebody says that they're 400 line or somebody says they're at the 500 line, the canyon Norfolk Canyon is about the 500 line.
Okay.
So it might be like 530 down to 490 and that kind of thing. So if somebody's out there fishing and they hear a captain and you're in GPS mode, you're in lat long, most GPSs have a button that will let them go to TDs. It's called TDs, and that will get you, and it converts that. So it's like a computer inside your GPS will convert it to TDs.
Very cool. So I just learned a whole lot in a very short amount of time. I'm probably have to go back and re-listen.
Sorry about that.
I'm gonna probably have to get my Texas Instrument out and go back and re-listen to really digest it. But it all sounded right. So put this into miles for me. So where you were catching these tunas, how many miles off of the out of Rudy Inlet Station were you to find that level?
Out of Rudy Inlet, if I have a waypoint put in my GPS ahead of time, so I wanted to go to the 300 line.
Mm-hmm.
So I have it put in there. That's approximately 62 miles out of Rudy Inlet, and that will get you to about 100 fathoms, and it's 6 feet to a fathom.
Okay.
So that's the other thing. If you hear captains out there, it's 6 feet to a fathom. So I was at the 100 fathom curve. If you look on a map, you actually see it. They mark out the 100. They actually have a place usually for 50 fathoms too.
Okay.
50 fathoms, 6 feet. It's 300 feet deep.
Right.
So that's where we went. Now we had some intel from the day before, talking to other fishermen and also seeing satellite shots, and it was pretty good water there. Actually, my last boat that I sold, guy bought it in Virginia Beach. He was fishing, and he caught a couple tuna and had 2 marlin out of about 5.
Wow.
So and he was fishing around some squid boats.
Okay.
So if you see a squid boat, they're pulling squid with a net. Well, fish know that, and so they're following these boats around too. Plus, if you see squid boat, that means they've got high-powered electronics, and they know where the squid are. They're not going to be just pulling in the blind. So we went to him, right to him. He was down around the 280, so he's probably 2 miles further south than the guys were the day before. And we fished around him for a while. Didn't catch anything. I'm always looking. You should have binoculars on there, looking hard. I found some clumps of weeds that were about 125 fathoms, which is about another mile and a half further east. We went out by those clumps of grass. Should always troll by clumps of grass, and we got hit by 4 dolphin. And then it might be a whole nother episode, but I do it a little bit different. Once I get hit by a dolphin, I take all my big stuff out of the water, and I have little bailing poles. And some people call it bailing dolphin, where they just sit in one spot. Well, we don't do that. We drag really, really slow with my bailing poles up and down that weed line. And that way you get 2, 3, 4 on a time. And that's a lot of fun. So we caught about a dozen dolphin, and then we didn't get any more bites after a couple passes. So I said, oh, time to move on. So started moving on, and went towards the squid boat again. And then a friend of mine called me that runs a boat out in Pirates Cove, and he was all the way up to the canyon on an overnight trip. So he was way north out of Pirates Cove. So he said, Rush, you need to be here. So we picked our lines up and ran to him about 8 miles further north to the 400 line. And he got hit by the tunas twice there. So, and it's funny or not funny, but we picked up all of our lines, and the last line we had in the water, we got a tuna. We're like, oh, great. Do I run? Well, if a good captain that says you need to be here, you need to be there. So we still ran to him and put our lines in, and my third line in got a tuna.
Boom.
And so we got hit 3 times by tunas, but we only ended up holding on to 2 of them.
Okay.
He got hit by 6, got all 6.
Wow.
So he ended up catching 14 tuna that day. Caught 3 first thing in the morning because it was an overnighter he was fishing, at daybreak, and caught 3. But during regular fish times, he caught 11, which is great. And he left at about 11:30 to go back home.
Wow.
In the morning. But so we got hit a couple times there. And what I mean by that is that, we've got teasers out too. Usually, if you're offshore fishing, you should have teasers out there, which are usually 5, 6 lines of squid. And then behind that, I put an islander, and we put a ballyhoo behind there with no hook.
Okay.
And then marlin will come up to it, or tuna, or other types of things, and they'll explode, which is very cool. All of a sudden, tuna will explode on it. You see splashing everywhere, which is great. Sometimes they go after the squids, and sometimes they go after the ballyhoo. But after missing so many on my teasers, I tell people a little secret, and that is usually when I call it wham fishing, which you're getting a lot of tuna at one time. We put those teasers on a regular pole, and so I call them hook teasers. So I take that teaser out, and the last bait, I put a hook on it, and I run it off a regular 50 wide. And so then if a tuna comes up and hits it, I'm going to hook him, which is what we did later in the day when we got hit by 7 of them. And then we end up catching 4 out of 7. And 1 was on one of our teasers with a hook in it.
So I'm curious about that.
It just helps your ratio.
Yeah.
What's that now?
Well, I'm curious about that. So if you've got that teaser, what happens when you get that fish boat side and you get all that teaser before the hook? How do you manage all that?
Well, you got to have a good mate. You got to have a good mate. First of all, you have somebody, and you tell them if they're fighting it, look, if I've got to let that line go, then I might let it go. You can't just put the rod down or put it and not pay attention to it, because if the tuna starts running, then mate needs to let it go out of his hands, or he's just going to tear up his hands or break the fish off. So you're right. It's a little bit more complicated to you usually go really slow with your boat, bumping in and out of gear, and you try to get that tuna to swim right beside the boat, and then you just gaff it right out of the water.
Got it.
So you gotta, but you are right. My hook teasers are a little bit shorter. So I may only have 4 squids and an islander as opposed to 6 or 7. So I have less teaser, less line to put in my hands.
Got it. That makes sense. And I'm looking at your dock shot right now where you've got that beautiful dozen of mahi, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tunas laying on the dock there.
Yes, sir.
So
great.
So was that a wham bite where we got all 7 at the same time?
Well, no, it was not. I got 1 single right when we were picking up our lines to run to my friend, and then when we got to where he was, I got hit 3 different times, but I ended up only catching 2 fish. So I got hit on my teasers, and then maybe 2 got hooked up, and I got 1. And then another time my teasers got hit, and I hooked up 3. I lost all 3. It happens. You pull them off. I had good anglers. Sometimes it's not the angler's fault that the fish just, can pull off.
Right.
If you're fighting one and you get slack line, well, they're probably going to get off. but,
Yeah.
but none of my guys, I would say got slack line on any of those hits. We just ended up only getting 2 fish out of probably about 9 bites.
Okay.
We only got 2 fish. Then when they stopped biting, and that's something else that you can pay attention to, we went back to where we got our bite before I picked up and ran to him. So I trolled 6 miles further south where we got our first tuna.
Uh-huh.
And on the way there, about a half mile from where we caught that fish, we saw tuna busting water. And we chased those busting tuna for a while because they pop up and then they pop down. You got to keep looking. They pop up, they pop down. We finally got close enough to where when we went through it and they were busting out of the water, we had 7 on at one time.
Ooh.
And they were still busting water around us with no, they were just eating their own bait, not my bait.
Uh-huh.
But then we only had 3 anglers with 7 fish on. That was hard. That's why we lost some. You're going to get some slack, and you got to make sure that you don't line touches line. So if somebody's new, crossing line will cut it like butter.
Oh.
So if you got a line crossing and you don't uncross it quickly, that line running across fast over another line is going to cut that line.
Got it. Friction. Yep.
Just like it would cut your finger, it's going to cut that line. So we're constantly trying to make sure they don't get crossed and they don't get tangled. And sometimes you're going to lose some fish doing that. But I'm fortunate we got 4 of those. We got 4 of that 7.
That's awesome.
And then by then we fished about another hour trying to find those, jumping fish again. We finally saw them, but they were such far away that we really couldn't get to them before it's time to come in. But it was a good day. We probably had 15 tuna bites, got 7, probably had another 5 bites on our teasers that didn't have hooks in them before I switched over. Once, we thought we were going to be marlin fishing. So we started out, which is probably a whole nother episode, talking about dink baits, which is using circle hooks and very light line, because we thought we were going to be marlin fishing. And when I'm tuna fishing, I'm using 50 Ws. And we set those up a little bit different too. I use hollow core line backing, so then I only have to use the top 200 yards as mono. You can put more line on a reel. And we do that so when I get a bite, I'm going to keep driving and trying to getting a third bite, a second bite, a third, a fourth, a fifth, sixth. We purposely keep driving.
Got it. Yeah, you're just stretching them out.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yes, sir. So that's why I have an extra line to help them.
Okay. And so then when you get those 7 knocked down, are you just working them in, basically like reeling in your flat lines first and then just kind of working them out based on how they're spaced out behind you? That
is exactly right. Getting all the rest of the baits out, finding when you stop, and then which one's further out, make sure they're not crossed, and then just trying to get one at a time. You don't want to bring more than one at a time to the boat because those tuna are fast, and if they dart and cross each other, even close to the boat, then the one's going to cut off the other.
That makes a lot of sense. And then talk me through, you get your tuna in the boat. What's the proper protocol for caring for a tuna once inside the boat in terms of the meat?
Well, some people will bleed them, which you could take a knife and right by their dorsal. But honestly, we don't do that. You want to make sure they keep them iced down. So, for instance, my fish box, again, it's a custom built boat. So I've got 2-inch foam in that box, that keel box in the back. And I start out by putting 4 bags of ice at the bottom of that. And so I'm driving around, it's cold already. And then once the tuna are in there, I've probably got another 8 bags or 10 bags in my freezer. So then I'm bringing more ice out. If you don't have that freezer, then I would bring as much ice as you can bring, because you do not want that meat to get hot.
Got it.
Because it gets really soft. So you do want that meat, and you don't want to just have all your tuna stacked up and then put 2 bags on top. No, you break that ice open so it's in between the fish, because the fish are hot. So they're going to, one fish is going to lay on the other fish, and if their meat is touching and there's no ice there, it could get hot. And it's much better for you if you're going to eat it raw, especially.
Right.
Make sure it's cool. Make sure it stay cool.
Speaking of eating it raw, you mentioned you're on your 6th boat. You're a young man still, but you've been fishing a while. So I'm sure you've eaten a few tunas in your time. Any
Oh yeah.
any favorite
Oh yeah.
recipes for either sushi or on the skillet grill? What's your favorite thing to do with some
Oh
tuna?
gosh, I would need to get my son involved with that. He's a great cook and would probably be able to tell you all the different things they bring. I have a couple customers that will cut a big chunk out and they bring all their fixins, rice and all their other stuff, and they eat it raw on the way back in.
Oh,
I'm not as much a raw guy. I just like it cooked on the grill, and I don't think you need to do a lot of seasonings or anything else. You just cook it on the grill, and it's just delicious.
yeah, you
Absolutely,
can't
really good.
can't beat fresh tuna. And then I see you got, these mahis rolling in too. We talked to Captain Bill Pappas last week, and he shared his tahi macos recipe, which sounded delicious. So, whether it's, tahi macos or on the grill or sushi, I think the real key is the base ingredient. And when it's fresh, like you guys get it, that's the magic sauce in all of it.
Oh yeah, somebody was telling me the other day I fished this morning on an inshore trip, and the folks were from Michigan, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not too on seafood." And I said, "Well, my people the other day said that too." And then they had some, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's delicious!" Because if you're in Ohio somewhere, you're not getting fresh fish. Think about it; it's probably been on a commercial boat for
Right.
4 or 5 days. It's probably been in a packing house 4 or 5 days. It's been at the grocery store 4 or 5 days. I mean, we're getting fish like what Bill does a lot. He's really good at doing that, and that is you're catching it and you're eating it that night or the next day. Oh my gosh, you can't get any fresher than that.
No, and that's when it gets really, really good. And that's one of the beautiful things about Virginia Beach is this incredible fishery that we have right here in our backyard that we can go out and get fish like that. And it's really encouraging to hear that they're kind of that water's moving in. They're out in that 60-mile range, that, 300, 400 line like you were talking about. So would you say it's shaping up like maybe what we missed in June is possibly coming our way here in July?
Yes, absolutely. I think that right now that our July is becoming June. The toughest part is that usually in June we can go to more edges and we have a more definitive place where to go. And
Hmm.
I don't think that's the case because I mentioned the 400 line. Well, they caught some in the canyon, which is like the 500 line. And during the tuna tournament, the guy that won it, he caught those big eyes in the northeast corner of the canyon. I mean, they're 300-pound fish in there.
Wow.
And they're there all the time. It's just a matter of whether you get lucky that they're going to come up because those big eyes live way deep.
Hmm.
And yeah, a buddy of mine who had an overnighter just 2 nights ago, he got hit at dusk. He got two big eyes. Unfortunately, he pulled them both off. And there was tuna during the tuna tournament. I was at the 650, which is probably 15 miles north of the canyon, catching some tuna. So
Wow.
I just think there's a lot of tuna. The problem is it's spread out everywhere.
Hmm.
So I would get to the 50 fathom curve or the 100 fathom curve and just start working it and hope. The whole thing about fishing, it's called fishing, not catching. So,
That's
they have
yeah.
tails. They don't have addresses. You gotta find them.
That's great.
And, but when you do there's nothing like having tuna blow up on all your stuff. It's just, you're going from total boredom to total chaos in a count of two, not
Right.
three.
Right.
1, 2 is chaos everywhere. And that there's nothing like that. Nothing like that.
No, I agree completely. And people don't know what it's like until they actually go out there and do it. And yes, whether it's cobia fishing or tuna fishing, there are those periods of doldrums and then boom, chaos. And so it's like once you've experienced the first time, it totally justifies all future boredom. You no longer care to sit for 4 or 5 hours and you're fine because there's a chance it could come and it's worth it.
Well, and it's great that you have customers. I got a lot of repeat. Most of my business is repeat customers, and the guy that went with me on Monday, I mean, he's gone with me every year for a couple of years, and we've had some okay days. I mean, this one, even though we had 7, as I said, we had 15 hits, so we had a lot of tuna exploding everywhere, and his reaction to me was, why have you been holding out on me? Why can't we do this every time?
Hmm.
Well, every trip isn't going to be that epic trip.
Right.
But I tell people all the time, you're not going to catch it sitting on the couch.
Yep. Amen to that.
Amen driving
to
around
that.
in your car is not going to get you that, once in a lifetime, I picture that tuna exploding on that or a marlin. I mean, I've already had two marlin I've caught and pulled off a blue marlin. We had one about 375 about a week and a half ago. I mean, I still picture that marlin today jumping right behind my boat about 10 feet.
That's a thing of beauty.
Oh my gosh, it's just incredible. So
Yeah.
that's why you get pumped up to do it, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, we got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got home at 8:30 at night. I mean, it's a long day, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, but it's totally worth it. I think whether you're on a mountaintop or out on the deep blue sea, you're that close to God's good creation, and experiencing it is just something that, stains in your brain in a way you can't forget. And, so folks that are listening and getting fired up with the thought of, a wham moment with 7 tunas on, or maybe that blue marlin jumping behind the boat and want to get out and experience it for themselves aboard Top Notch. Captain Russ, what's going to be the best way for folks to get up with you and book a trip aboard Top Notch Sport Fishing Charters?
Well, I appreciate that. They can go to our website, which is called fishtopnotch.com, or they can give me a call, right, and my cell number will be on there, or they can just give me a call on my cell phone, which is 757-681-8068. We've been doing this back since the 70s, so back when bluefins were around a lot, and we just love to do it, but we've been doing it a long time, and that's what it takes. So it's a lot of who you know, too. We get a lot of intel before we go. We just don't randomly run out there and start fishing somewhere. I mean, it's all pre-planned and pre-worked, and hopefully the plan comes together, but it is fishing if they're not biting, or we can't drive over them, but it's a lot of fun. We focus on somebody having a good time.
Amen to that. I like what you said about fish have tails, but they don't have addresses. But like you were sharing, the community together, you might be able to figure out what area code they're in, and that's going to give you a much better potential hookup ratio. So like you said, those years of experience in community are going to give you a big advantage to get out there and being successful.
Oh, there's a lot of great captains out here, and we all try to work together. So all of our people have a good time. We really don't have that many folks that are just going to, not share information because they want to be the hero and catch 5 and have everybody else catch nothing. Mm-hmm. That's really, like I said, I got a call from, when I ran to that spot, I got a call, and I certainly share the information too. And so I would encourage, if somebody's fishing in their own boat, to share that information too, because you think about it, it's a lot of time, money, and effort by everybody out there. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly enough fish to get around. And you want to get in that, like you said, the zip code. You want to get near, as best you can, other people catching fish, because there's school fish and these tuna are moving fast. So they're always moving up, down, and around. So, you don't have to get close to somebody. In fact, if you try to get close to somebody that's catching a fish, the fish already moved. They're already gone.
Right.
But he might be close to them, but you don't need to be real close to the guy catching a fish, because those fish have already moved on.
Yeah, that's sage wisdom, and I learned a whole lot today listening to you share. So I look forward to having you on future episodes to talk about what's going on offshore.
No problem. Anytime. Give me a call. I'll be glad to help you.
Awesome. Well, folks, that's going to wrap up a great report from Captain Russ aboard Top Notch about what's going on offshore. We're going to take a quick break, so y'all stick around. Hilton's offshore charts. The days of heading out and blindly looking for good fishing areas are pretty much over. Don't waste time and money on fuel searching for fish. You need the most recent, highest resolution images to not only know where to go, but where not to go. The knowledge provided by today's technology is critical when planning an offshore fishing trip. So make the choice that professional captains all over the East Coast make and choose Hilton's Real-Time Navigator. The easy-to-use interface and excellent customer service will have you on the fish every time you go. Check them out at hiltonsoffshore.com. That's hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Captain Colt North with Litigator Sport Fishing. How are we doing today, Captain Colt?
Great. How are you doing, Luke?
Doing good, man. It's been hot this week. How are you guys faring out there with all these, high humidity, high 90s, feels like 125? Y'all surviving?
A lot of sunscreen, a lot of days with our shirts off, and a lot of cold waters.
I'm sure, man. It's been warm, but I mean, it's how's it been for the fishing? Is that helping, hurting?
I mean, it makes it a little harder comfort-wise, but it's been some phenomenal fishing. I have no complaints of the past week, much less the past season since it came in.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Right before we hit the record button, we were talking about that custom Intrepid, that 87 Intrepid you guys have been, building and tricking out. And you were talking about your custom pipe work and your custom top. That T-top is huge. So I'm sure the folks downstairs enjoy the shade on those hot days. I'm curious, who did your metal work and your fab work on that beautiful rig you got there?
Dylan Murray with Murray Marine Fabrications, a good friend of mine. He's quite the specialist when it comes to tower building and aluminum and welding, and he's done phenomenal work for me on 2 boats and helped repair some things, and I've sent him to a lot of people. He's awesome. He's located out of Pocosin. Great guy, great quality, great price. Can't say enough good things about him. And a mutual friend of ours as well, Dylan Copeland. He runs a business called Tidewater Composites. He builds hard tops and does fiberglass work and whatnot, and they work together in a way. So when you get a new, tower job, we'll call it, I wanted to replace my hardtop and tower this winter. We worked together with both of them, and Dylan Copeland popped out a new hardtop for me that was extra, extra wide, and Dylan Murray popped out one of the biggest towers he's ever built. And they're great guys to work with, both very close friends of mine, and some of the highest quality work I've ever seen.
Yeah, man. I mean, just looking at some pictures of your rig, I mean, it looks super quality, super professional. Even made the underside of the top match the side of the boat. And then, man, that seat up top looks like a lazy boy couch you got up there, man. That must be comfortable.
Yeah, it is. I definitely don't have any complaints.
That's awesome, man. Well, tell us a little bit about what you guys have been doing over the past couple of days, what you've been seeing and catching.
Yeah, so when the weather's right, I like to throw in a little. See, well, first of all, most of what I do is sight fishing, so I'm out there cobia fishing every day. It's been phenomenal for the most part. But I also like to throw in trolling for mackerels and bluefish while we're looking, just to give people things to do, put a little extra meat in the cooler, a little something else going on. And we also like to do some bottom fishing. A lot of guys like Jack with King Tide, they're out there at the bridge tunnel in their backyard, and they're going to be doing their sheepshead fishing there. But most of my sheepshead fishing is done on artificial reefs, and it definitely seems like the reef fishing hasn't picked up quite yet. We've been picking at a couple of sheepsheads, but it's taken, you got to be there at the right time with the right tide, and everything's got to be perfect, and kind of got to weed through some bites. So sheepshead fishing hasn't been very productive for us, but we've caught a couple. Cobia fishing's been phenomenal. Days seeing 20, 30, 40, 50 fish aren't uncommon at all. Catching double digits is not uncommon at all. Seen a great, quality and quantity this year. A great class of fish have been around. Been lucky to release a lot of nice ones, 50 inches plus. I consider any fish over 40 an awesome fish, and we've been able to release a lot of them and harvest our limit many times this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, any cobia over 40 inches is going to be not only a great fight, but great table fare. And in my opinion, 42 to 44-inch cobia is probably one of the better tasting fish once you get to the grill. Some of those bigger fish, meat management and getting those fillets cut down to the right size can be a little tricky. I'm curious, looking at a map, where do you guys fish out of?
So I'm leaving out of the Picosin River. It's a tiny little river in between Back River and the York River. I'm in this southwest corner of the bay.
Southwest. Okay, I got you. I see that here on the map. So when you're talking about, doing some bottom fishing and whatnot, you're not necessarily making that run to the bridge every single time, which is a little bit of hike as in contrast to those popping out of Lynnhaven or Little Creek. So you're poking at some of those artificial reefs. So you mentioned, doing some sheepshead fishing on that. Talk me through what that's like in terms of like tide and when it's ideal and how you kind of approach that.
Yeah, so there's one big key thing for me that's ideal, and that's weather. Obviously sun or clouds don't matter, but wind is a big factor for me. I find that I don't even enjoy trying to, we'll just call it bottom fishing, because you're not necessarily just targeting sheepshead. There's a plethora of species on reefs. So we'll call it bottom fishing, and I really don't enjoy doing it in rough seas. One, I've got, a trolling motor on the bow of my boat, which has been phenomenal this year and helped me out a ton as far as being able to move spots and hold us where we are. And the big thing with that is it's not, I guess I could get a longer one, but man, it's so much more fun to just bottom fish when the weather's a little nicer. When you're not rocking around, when you're not getting thrown around. The first big thing is going to be wind. Picking those nice days, that way you can really feel the bite. You've got that sensitivity from your jig or your dropper loop rig or whatever you may be using to the tip of your rod. Especially with a sheepshead on a reef, they seem to have the most nimble, slight bite ever. Whether it's one peck and your bait's gone, or whether there's a couple pecks and your bait's gone, there's so much timing that goes into it. So really, weather's the biggest thing. The second biggest thing for me is going to be tide, and tide changes. Some days you find that, or some weeks I'll say, you find that they might like the first hour or two of incoming. They might like the first hour or two of outgoing. They might like slack. They might like it running. And with how limited I've been able to bottom fish this year, I've literally only been able to do it 3 times since really starting to fish every day on about June 10th. Not to say we haven't been blessed with great weather as far as sun goes, but it's been blowing. It seems like it's been blowing a lot and makes it a little harder for me to justify going bottom fishing. But very tide dependent, very weather dependent, and I haven't even been able to figure out exactly what I want yet.
Yeah, and you mentioned, just how that bite, especially on the sheep's head, can be tough to time. I've tried it a few times and haven't been very successful. It does seem to be very tricky. And the guys that, come back with a couple sheep's head, certainly have something figured out. So like in your opinion, when it comes to, like some basics, like if I'm going to bait my hook, like am I covering the whole hook with a fiddler or a crab of some sort? Or am I just putting the hook tip into it? What's just talk me through the basics of baiting my hook and getting it down there the right way.
Yeah, by no means am I professional, but we've definitely found a few things that work. So, our main baits are going to be fiddler crabs or blue crabs. And when we cut up those blue crabs, we quarter them. We make sure to hook them. I'm trying to describe this while picturing it in my head, in or out of a joint, but poking through the shell. And it's easier to describe with a fiddler. If you go in through a leg joint and you poke your hook out of the shell of a fiddler, you don't want the barb to come out. You want for me at least, I've found that works best is having just the very tippy tip of that hook showing, but the barb and the hook itself to be embedded in the crab. My idea is, and this probably goes against what some people say, because some people like using a whole entire half of a crab for a sheep's head. You could probably catch a sheep's head on a whole blue crab.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys like a half of one. I actually prefer, especially when using fiddlers, I like grabbing the smallest one that we have. I like using the smallest jig I can. My theory with that is that the smaller the bait, the more likely it is to get in the fish's mouth. And I'll be the first to admit, when we go bottom fishing, man, I swing and miss like an unbelievable amount of times. So what I tell my clients every time we're out there, I say, look, if you get a bite, unless you can obviously tell it was structure that you were feeling, if you get a bite, just send it. And, the best thing you can do is miss a few and try and figure it out, because when you hook one, you're going to feel what you did that time, and usually you can replicate it.
Okay. Yeah. That's a great point. I just recently did a little bit of flounder fishing and I hadn't flounder fished in a long time. And the bite was kind of foreign to me. So like I wasn't certain of like really when to swing. And then I got the same advice you just gave, which was just go ahead and swing, hook sets are free. And then sure enough, on like the fourth or fifth time, boom, got a nice little flounder. And then it kind of like settled into my mind, what that bite feels like. And then going forward, the swings are a little bit more confident. So, you mentioned sometimes the tides, they like maybe the first little bit of incoming or the last little bit of outgoing. Any particular wreck type that I should look for, artificial reef that I should look for that maybe holds more sheep's heads than others, or is it really just luck of the draw when you head out there?
I mean, in my personal opinion, it's luck of the draw. I've caught plenty of fish on the smallest piece at an artificial reef, and I've caught plenty of fish on the biggest piece.
Mm-hmm.
A good thing to look for is, pay attention to which way the tide's going and try and fish on, I'll call it the back side of that tide, where the current might be rolling over it, and it gives them a little kind of not shelter, but it gets them a little out of the current. They obviously live on structure and in current their whole lives, but they might tend to school up right there.
Mm-hmm.
We found that before. I've got a great accessory on my boat this year besides the trolling motor. It's Garmin Live Scope, and definitely does not work as good on a reef as it does at, say, the bridge tunnel when you're looking at vertical pylons, and you can really see. I mean, I did that for the first time this year too. I went to the bridge the other morning, and you can see every single spadefish, sheep's head, tog, cobia, whatever it may be on that piling, and you can see the exact depth they're at. If it's only got a couple of fish on it, why waste the time fishing it for that one bite? We'll go to poles that have 20, 30, 40 marks on it. Granted, you can't always tell if it's spadefish or sheep's heads, but usually if there's a lot of marks on it and they're kind of spread out in the water column, you can fish that pole and find out, okay, yeah, that's my targeted species. It works similar at the reef. I'll put my live scope down and I'll kind of work around that structure and see, hey, can I find, maybe there's a school of drums sitting over here. I see spadefish every time, but I don't typically target them. But you can really pick and choose your places by doing that too. So I'm a little spoiled that I've got the live scope. I'm sure not everybody has that, but it does help me exponentially.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard folks talk about it, but never really had it explained the way that you just did. So, I mean, are we talking about like an image on your Garmin or your Simrad, and then, you know, even more clear than say chirp? Like, is that what you're actually seeing on the screen?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see the outline, a 3D print of that fish swimming around the structure.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's pretty awesome. Even with down view which is what I'm using most of the time on the reef. It's basically a sonar that I'm putting in the water, pointing it where I want to see, which is usually under the boat because we're, reef fishing. The structure's beneath us, not vertical. And I literally can see the fish swimming around there and be like, okay, there's only a couple of fish here. Is it worth our time, or do we want to go move around and say, hop from spot to spot? And we'll keep moving until you really find what you want.
Man, that's cool. And then, when you're fishing on the wrecks, besides sheep's head, what are some of the other species that you're picking up on those artificial reefs or wrecks over that way?
Yes, as funny as it is, man, on blue crab and fiddlers this year, we actually, and previous years, we catch plenty of flounder doing it. If someone's fishing a little bit in the mud versus on the structure itself, we catch plenty of flounder, tautog, black drum, red drum. We've caught cobia on fiddlers and jigs before. Sheep's head, croaker, spot, the lovely menacing oyster toads.
Yeah.
It's really quite endless. Sometimes we'll reel up a jig that, maybe a sheep's head just bit your bait off of, and you'll catch a bluefish or a Spanish just reeling up the jig because it's shiny and flashy.
Oh, that is too funny. I'm looking at some of your pictures from recent trips, and I see one where you've got some nice flounder, some sheep's head, some cobias, and then some odd long looking things. What are those?
Yeah. I didn't even elaborate on those, man. That was the weirdest catch of my life. Those were 3 to 4 foot jumbo eels. I mean, I don't even know. I killed them because I heard they were good shark bait, and a buddy of mine had a shark trip coming up. And I also killed them because I'd never caught anything like it before. They are not the same eels we're throwing at cobia on a daily basis. These things were, I don't even know how to describe them. I was shocked when I reeled it up. I was a little confused and upset because it fought so good. I didn't know what was going on, but I figured I got to kill these things and at least take a picture with them because they were quite literally the size of my 2 cobias that I killed in my limit that day.
They are. I mean, they look like deflated cobias. They're just as long, but skinny. I mean, that is bizarre. So, what did they eat?
Typical blue crab on a jig, and I felt a tap, 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 and I did my usual swing, and I hooked it, and I thought I was snagged as could be, and it actually, I guess the eel was living in a hole down there, and he stayed in the hole, and I free-spooled it, and I waited a minute, and I was thinking to myself, I think I have a fish on here, and I reeled up tight, and sure enough, he came out the hole, and he fought the entire way up, and I'm wondering what on earth kind of fish do I have that has no, head shakes or tail kick. I mean, I don't feel anything normal about this. I was kind of praying it was a doormat flounder that I not snagged, but, hooked weird or something.
Yeah.
But nope, it was just a 4 foot. One of them was like 44 inches and the other one was like 36 inches. And you say they're skinny based on the picture, but I could barely wrap my hand around their body. They had like a 5-6 inch diameter. It was absolutely absurd.
Oh wow. Yeah, the angle of the photo is a little deceiving. I can tell that. But it's interesting because
Right.
a couple episodes ago, I think we were chatting with Jake Bolts on Flying Fish, and he was talking about those things. And supposedly, you cut into them, and there's supposed to be some of the most beautiful white meat that's very delicious. And I think we were joking around about how cobia fishermen and throwing eels. It's like the thought of eating an eel or consuming an eel is gross. But
Yeah.
supposedly,
And
this,
that's
yeah, supposedly this is like supposed to be good to eat. But glad to hear they're being used for shark bait.
Yeah, that's great and all, but Jake can keep those eels for him if he wants some. I'll gladly catch him some. I would not be testing. I'm be honest with you right now. I didn't even touch it to unhook it. I grabbed a rag. I was a little bit intimidated by everything about it. I was like, this is not normal. I want no part of this. I don't even think I got a picture holding it. Like, that's how I just tossed them in the bag, and we took them out when we got home and put them in another bag and gave them to a buddy for shark bait.
Oh, that's too funny, man. What a fun though sort of experience. The kind of the joy of bottom fishing is like you never know what you're gonna hook into.
Well, and that's the wild thing though. I've been fishing these reefs for like 5-10 years now, and I've never caught one. Never in my life have I even heard of anyone catching one like that. I mean, you'll catch big eels like we use for cobia fishing in crab pots and stuff, and they'll slither out when you're pulling them up. You'll catch eels in minnow pots, but I've never caught one with a face on it that looks like that and the size of those. I mean, they were like prehistoric.
Man, that's cool. I know some interesting stuff has been getting caught this week. The cool thing about the Lower Chesapeake Bay is, we're right there next to the ocean, and depending on the given year and the weather patterns and whatnot, you just never know what's going to swim in there. And I saw, Zach Hoffman the other day pulled in a triple tail. And, you don't see those every single day of the week either.
Nope, you don't. And it's funny, a couple of years ago, I swear to you, I saw 30 or 40, but each of the last 2 or 3 summers, I'll also be honest, being out there every single day, 100 days of summer, I'll see, if I'm lucky, 10, 15. I haven't even seen one yet this year, and he's already caught one, so that's really cool. I'm hoping they show up. They're one of those fish that really get my blood pumping when I see them. When you're looking for cobias all day and you see something like that, it's pretty awesome. We've been lucky enough to catch a couple in the past couple of years, but I want mine for this year for sure.
Yeah, they're special, man. I know down like in the Gulf area, they call them blackfish, and they can get up to like 30 pounds. And the last
Yep.
time I even saw one was in 2019, and was out cobia fishing and saw a turtle. Got up close, the turtle was dead, and sure enough, swimming around underneath it was about an 8 pound triple tail. And I scrambled to find something on the boat that I could throw to it. Found a little, Z-Man paddle tail, shrimp color on a, quarter-ounce jig head, flicked that in there, destroyed it immediately. I completely forgot I was still tied onto a cobia rod with cobia drag, and it was basically just like a tug of war. Got it into the net, into the boat. I heard a chink, and, hook hits the floor, and I look at it, it's laid open 45 degrees. Probably was 2 seconds from losing that fish. But yeah, not only was it special to see one and catch one, but goodness, they're good to eat.
Oh yeah, for sure. I got a really weird triple tail story for you. It was like August, and I was checking some buoys, late fall cobia season pattern, and I saw a triple tail on a buoy, and for some stupid reason, my instinct was to grab an eel, and I threw an eel. It just worked out to be like this. I had what we'd call a pencil eel in the boat or in the bucket. It was like a little 6-inch eel the size of your finger, and I threw it at the buoy, and the triple tail smoked it, and I hooked him, and my adrenaline was going, and I was freaking out. It was like a 8 to 10 pounder. I was super stoked, and he was kind of fighting, but not really. I was kind of like, I hooked him hard, and I was dragging him on the surface, and I was almost like, I don't even care if this thing fights. I just want it in the boat. And yeah, the adrenaline got to me, and I tried to boat flip it, and boom, popped off the hook right there next to the boat. And that was like the only triple tail I hooked that summer. I was pretty upset about that one.
No, that hurts. That hurts. I mean, we've all had things like that happen. Cobia fishing, we've had those boat side tragedies. That's tough, man. So switching gears, to cobia and sight fishing, and what you guys have coming up this week. I know we got a little bit of a interesting weather pattern with this thunderstorm collective coming our way the next couple of days. But next couple trips, what are you guys going to be getting into?
I got a normal full day tomorrow, hoping to sight fish some cobias and do some trolling and whatnot. And then Friday and Saturday, I'm in the ODU not the ODU Big Man's tournament. I'm in the ODU tournament, cobia tournament that happens each summer usually. And yeah, I don't know what to think about that one. It's going to be interesting, with the weather we've got calling for it. You always pray for sun, and it always seems like you get some sun on tournament days, but you get a whole lot of wind. And for the first time, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of wind, but it's a whole lot of rain, which is not good.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I was talking to a couple other captains, we'll be in it as well, as a Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report team. And I think it's a competition, and everybody's going to be dealing with the same conditions. So, when it's tough out there like that, the visibility's tough. Sometimes you see those that know how to chum and bottom fish, maybe have an edge. And you could be out there for 7-8 hours as a sight fisherman and get 2 hours of sun, and it is what it is. So what's your strategy going to be if we have poor sun conditions?
I'll definitely be soaking on the bottom. I'd have no problem chumming for cobia. I definitely don't like doing it as summer goes on and the water gets hot and you got shark problems and whatnot. But I will definitely figure out a game plan as far as where, and I will probably soak on bottom. And as soon as there's a little sun, I'll probably start looking.
Very cool. Yeah, man. Well, one thing is for sure, regardless of the fishing conditions, Saturday night we're gonna have an awesome dock party over there at the ODU Sailing Center. Should be some great food, drinks, fun, and I'm hopeful and prayerful that this, track of whatever this system is that barrel's pushing our way, maybe it'll miss us and we'll end up with some good luck. But one thing's for sure, like you said, looking at a 5-day forecast, when you see like south, and then all of a sudden the day of the tournament, you see turns to west north and then north. That's always disheartening because not only is it not sunny sometimes, but now you're 4 to 5 foot waves. And we're going to talk about this later on in this episode on the What Did You Learn, just about boat safety from a gentleman that shared some of his story from the June 15th tournament when unfortunately their boat capsized. So safety is also a priority, but it's definitely good to see that we're looking at some south winds both Friday and Saturday. So at least regardless of the sun conditions, we can be out there and doing it safely, barring any sort of thunderstorms. But yeah, man, so for folks that want to get out with you and maybe do some trolling for Spanish and blues, get some cobias, maybe jump on a reef or two and smack some sheep's head and maybe a flounder or one of these prehistoric eels that we probably should or shouldn't eat. What's going to be the best way
Yeah.
for folks to get up with you and book a trip?
Yeah, best way is always my phone number. I'm really responsive to texting calls, 757-345-9698. And I'm on social media, Instagram and Facebook mainly. And I'm at Litigator Sport Fishing.
Awesome, man. Well, certainly, folks, give him a shout. Like he said, he fishes out up at Cosin. So anyone on, the Norfolk, Hampton roads, Portsmouth, what's on up there? Newport News, Yorktown, Gloucester, coming down from Richmond. Litigator is going to be a great option for you. Get out there and catch some fish and make some memories.
Yep, love to have you.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks so much for being on the show this week, guys. That's going to wrap up a really great report talking through several species. Let's take a real quick break and hear from this week's sponsor. Killer Dock. Most fishermen clean their fish on something like a unsightly old wooden table or the top of a cooler, somewhere that is not comfortable, not sanitary, and not attractive. Killer Dock makes the greatest fish cleaning station known to mankind. They are built from marine-grade aluminum and are corrosion-resistant clear-coated to protect it from the harsh salt environment. Killer Dock makes tables and canopies at several different sizes. So whatever you need on your dock, deck, or patio, they have a fish cleaning station for you. Check out killerdock.com to see more. All right, guys, we want to welcome back a friend of the show, Captain Eric Myers with Heads and Tails Charters. Captain Eric, how we doing today, bud?
Good, buddy. How are you?
Doing good. I know we're just on audio here for the podcast, for the show, but we're on video right now. I see you got a gigantic dog next to you. What kind of dog is that?
Great Dane, buddy.
Oh, my gosh. What's the name?
Percy.
Percy. Well, if folks, if you're ever down Log Bay Point and you see a horse walking down the dock, it's not a horse. It's a Great Dane named Percy.
Yep.
Belongs to Captain Merrick. But man, I'm excited to dive into a fishing report about what's been going on inshore. It's been hot this week, like really hot. I guess the past almost 2 weeks now, it's just been sweltering. But I know you've still been jumping in the little boat and getting in the inlet and hitting a few things. What have you guys been up to? What you been seeing?
Dude, a lot of nice puppy drum, a lot of flounder. Like probably the best year on flounder we've had in a long time. Miscellaneous spot and cracker. Caught a few really, really big spot. Taking families out, young kids, double rigs and stuff. It's great constant fun.
Yeah, I bet for the kids it's awesome, even if you're not catching a puppy drum or a flounder, if you take your family and you got young kids and they can, yank on a croaker or a spot, every couple of minutes. I mean, that's perfect to keep it entertaining and fun.
Oh man, and you throw them on the live well too, and like the younger kids, 5, 6 year olds. I mean, that's the easiest way to keep them entertained.
Yeah,
Just have a level full of bait for them to play with. Ridiculous.
that's awesome. So you mentioned some puppy drum and some flounder. This time of summer, it's obviously hot. The water temperature is getting a little bit higher. What have you been having, good luck with in terms of like your tackle setup and maybe a bait of choice?
I said this time of year we normally switch completely over to live bait for my charters. Usually, it's really hard to beat live bait this time of year because there's just so much of it in the river. Other than that, early mornings, real late in the afternoon, you can't go wrong with top water fishing. Been catching a lot of reds back on the oyster beds and the flats back in Lynnhaven on top water. Other than that, miscellaneous bluefish bites too. Sure.
Are you still seeing some of those big chopper blues every now and then?
Not real big ones. I mean, 25, 26 inches maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing compared to 4 or 5 weeks ago what we had then.
Yeah, that was a pretty insane run of some really big bluefish. I mean, I know you got me out there one of those times. I mean, goodness gracious, I don't think there's anything more fun than that on light tackle. You mentioned some early morning and late evening puppy drum on top water near some of those oyster beds that are tucked back in Lynnhaven. I'm not super familiar with or good at throwing top water. So what are some of my like target depths maybe to look at? And then in terms of like throwing a top water and trying to get, a bite from a puppy drum, talk me through that and how I can be better at that.
So this time of year, it gets real hard to key in with charters when the water's so dirty and so warm. So like first thing in the morning, like right at sunrise, you can target pretty much any flat, really, as long as it's three. I mean, I'll fish up to 1.5 feet, 3 foot of water. And basically, in my mind, any noise and racket that they can hear on the bottom, because that's usually where they're going to be sitting, swimming through.
Hmm.
It'll attract them up to the surface, and you'll usually entice a strike out of it. But in the afternoons, it seems like they get on bait pods and stuff in the inlet. That you'll see them chasing bait 6, 7 foot of water in some of the back coves. Uh, in that case, it's just pitch it towards any bait pod and work your lure out of the bait to make it seem like it's an injured bait fish. We've caught a bunch on like the Zare spook one knockers, the saltwater
Hmm.
ones. A lot on like the what is it? The mirror lure top dogs. That's
Okay.
probably one of my favorites, just because it's just that single knock. It's real low pitch and it seems to travel through the water real good.
In terms of like my leader, if I'm fishing a jig head, I normally go down to like a 12 or 14, 15 pound fluoro. When you're fishing a top water, do you change up your leader type at all?
So in the summer, like I was saying, with that water being so dirty and warm, those fish really aren't. They're used to seeing a school of bait flash by them, and they just got to eat.
Okay.
Uh, all my leaders in the summertime, 30 to 40 pound tops
In the inlet?
in the inlet, and
And-
that's because when you're throwing a top water, you don't know what you just threw over because you're not going to get snagged. You're not on the bottom. That could be a giant rock pile that you just cast it over. And when that fish hits it, it was coming over the rock pile to eat it anyway. So when he nose dives back into it, it gives you a saving grace. Or like you're working it down the side of a dock.
Mhm.
It gives you just that little bit of extra insurance to not lose, let's say, a $15, $16 lure
Yeah.
on the first cast, type deal. And a lot of times I'm having younger anglers like 13, 14. I've had a couple 12-year-olds that they want to catch one on top water. That's all they want to do. So it gives me just a little reassurance. So when that bail flips my top water plug, I'm not having to go start the boat and go over to get my top water plug.
Right. Yeah. You're able to, do your little, what's that little method you use where like when you're snagged, you're able to help yourself get unsnagged by doing something with the rod and the line.
We've always called it like banjoing or slingshotting it.
Uh-huh.
You just get your rod bowed up into like a 45-degree angle with enough line to when you pull tight with your finger and you let it go, you want your rod tip to be perfectly straight up with no tension on your line at all.
Okay.
That way, all that shock from that line coming through your guides goes down your line to your lure. Because if you pull your rod tight, like if you bow your rod over and you flick it a bunch of times, all you're doing is driving that hook in deeper
Uh-huh.
because your rod's coming back up on your line that's already tight. So you want it, a lot of the times I like to point the rod at it, pull it tight as I can, flick it, and that way it shoots your line backwards and hopefully carries your lure off whatever you're snagging on.
So it's almost like whenever you've been like dragging a garden hose through the yard and you get like, stuck on a paver or something and you kind of give it that little whip to send some slack back through the line to, jump it off, so to speak. So you're grabbing that line directly above the reel, between the reel and the
Yep.
first guide. You're pulling it back while the rod is loaded up, and then you're just kind of snapping, letting it loose, almost like letting an arrow fly.
Yep. Just bow and arrow in it.
So that works. That'll sometimes get a stuck jig or topwater plug off of a oyster rock or a snag on the bottom.
I mean, 9 times out of 10, we'll get our lures back one
That's
way or
awesome. That is awesome. I can attest to having been snagged on a dock a many a time. So I will have to give that a shot next time to either A, hopefully get a lure back, or not have to do something dodgy with your boat near a dock that you don't own. So talk me back through, I've got a top water plug. I've found some good depth water, maybe a little feature like an oyster bed or something. Maybe I see some bait and I start, covering some water, putting some casts out there and working that top water. How do you like to actually work that top water plug back to you? Is there some method to the retrieve that really helps to create that correct like harmonic or sound from that top water bait?
It's always been a twitch, twitch, pause. So a left, right, and then pause. That's always my go-to. It's usually the easiest one for beginners to learn.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest part of the walk the dog lures, like those Zare spooks and top dogs and stuff, is just getting started with it. You got to hold the rod. You can't hold your rod real up high. You're going to have to work it with your rod tip down, and you got to twitch it down with slack in your line.
Okay.
So you're basically popping the slack,
Okay.
and that'll work your lure left to right. all depends on where you're fishing. A lot of times when I'm in those flats where there's not a lot of current, way back in Lynnhaven,
Hmm.
you can get away with a pop pop, let it sit for a second, pop pop, and then like you were saying up by the docks and stuff up there towards the bridge, like by Chicks and stuff, those oyster beds over there, you can you can work it a lot faster because normally that water's a little cleaner too.
Hmm.
So you can fish. Let's just say, for instance, that rock, those oyster beds on the right side of what is it, the Western Branch, right there across from tennis courts.
Yeah. Hmm.
You can work topwater plug down that bank. I've done it a many a time, and you don't stop it. It's just twitch, 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 twitch. I usually throw it up current and work it back with the current.
Okay.
So there's no stopping there because you're working your bait with the current.
That makes sense.
It looks and acts just like a real bait those fish are going after, unlike the stuff that are back in those back coves where there's not a lot of current. You can twitch, you can watch the bait fish move around back there. They're not running and jumping everywhere. You'll see a school of mullet move 5 feet. So that's what's normal back there.
I see. Okay. So when you get a hit on a top water, it's been so long since I've topwater fished that I feel like I'd probably for sure screw it up. But what's the right kind of approach to, I'm twitch, twitch, pause, twitch, twitch, pause. I'm imagining they probably most often are hitting it on a pause. So when I do get hit on top water, what's the right protocol to try to get a good hookup?
I always say reel up the slack if you feel the fish is there. You have,
Okay.
like I said, because we're working these lures with a lot of slack in them in
Hmm.
the line already. What you want to do is not move your rod, just reel.
Okay.
Reel. If you feel weight, set the hook.
Okay.
A lot of times you'll see those fish blow up on it and they miss. They'll be
Uh,
2 feet behind the lure. And if you jerk it when you see the fish explode, that I mean, more than likely you'll get a second cast at that fish.
mhm.
A lot of times you don't.
Y-
Like
y-
you'll cast right back in there and you'll be, man, I wish I could have got that one. Oh well.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom to what you just said because I've experienced that a lot, like cobia fishing, for example. Like when you think you have an eat and you bill dance it, you may or may not be hooked up. And if you're not hooked up, you basically have no chance of getting that lure or that bait back to that fish. So that makes a lot of sense. So if I see a bite or I think I'm getting a bite, just reel the slack up until I feel the rod load and then do my hook set.
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing a lot of times what I tell some of my customers that are very like bass fishing oriented where they're
Hmm.
swinging and missing a lot is I tell them don't even look at it. Once you get the groove on, like once you get the groove of it, where you get the top water working right, you get the right cadence that you like. And it's all about confidence. I mean, you can
Yeah.
throw anything on top and probably get a bite. What my favorite thing to throw is not the next person's favorite thing to throw. But once you get the confidence in it that you can work it without looking at it, I tell people don't look at your bait. Work that bait till you feel it come tight. And a lot of times, especially later on in the summer or like earlier in the fall, when we're doing trout trips, my trouts, some of my trout trips don't start till 8:30 at night, and they run till midnight. So you're not seeing the fish blow up; you're feeling it.
Ah,
And I tell you what, the amount of hookups that we get compared to daytime fishing, like early morning, late afternoon, is insane because they can hear the fish explode, but they can't see it, so they're not jerking.
oh,
Biggest
interesting.
thing is don't jerk. You just take a crank. If you feel the weight, then you set the hook.
Yeah.
Because
It takes a lot of kind of self-awareness and self-discipline because, getting a bite is always exciting, especially if it's been like, maybe 30, 40 minutes and you haven't had a bite and then you finally get that bite. So, that's a good mindset to kind of drill. I'm even drilling it in my head right now too. It's just like be calm, be patient, reel in that slack, don't jerk, and you're probably going to have a better hookup ratio.
and the best part is if you reel up that slack and it's not there, that fish 9 times out of 10 is going to be following your lure. I've had them eat. I've had them blow up on it on the first twitch, and I've had them eat it 3 feet off the side of the boat.
Man.
So it's like, was that the same fish that swatted at it when it first hit the water? I don't know. I like to think it is
Yeah.
because I think that fish is following it all the way to the boat, deciding, all right, now I'm going to eat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's part of it. And I just love seeing those redfish because all you see is just those white lips come up and grab onto it.
Yeah, and they're explosive too. I mean, obviously everybody's been catching some of these big reds out of the schools out on the Chesapeake Bay, but switching, dialing it back down to some light tackle, maybe like a what, 2,500, 3,000 spinning reel on a 7.0, 7.6, probably perfect for it.
Yeah, it's all my trout rods are all my redfish rods. So they're all 7 foot medium light with 2,500 with 10 pound braid.
Okay, 10-pound braid. So you can really sling that thing out there.
Oh, we're casting miles here
Wow.
because when I get up on those flats in the back and in those coves and stuff, I can park my boat in the middle of the cove and I can have people cast to both sides of the cove, which
Oh,
is great
wow.
because some of those coves are 2.5 feet a full cove.
Oh my
So you
goodness.
can get a bite when you first hit the water next to the grass or dock, or you get a bite out in the middle of nowhere because those redfish are just roaming around looking for bait.
Man. Well, I know I'm never going to ask you to tell me like a spot, but I heard a lot about some depths and things like that. So, for those listening, you could obviously go out there and try to do it yourself, or you could, book up with Captain Merrick on heads and tails and get out there and probably have a lot better luck. But switching gears from top water for puppy drum to maybe fishing some deeper water, maybe targeting, puppy drum or flounder. When you switch into those deeper water, targeting them in the deeper water, what's your kind of go-to there in terms of a lure? Are we still bait fishing or are we using jigs? What's the go-to there?
I mean, my all-time favorite is, like I said, this time of year you can't go wrong with bait. It's almost it'll make or break a trip.
Hmm.
You can throw. I have some guys that are diehard artificial guys, and we'll throw lures from let's say 5:30 in the morning until noon, and we'll catch 3 fish. And I'll pick up a noon trip to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'll catch 30
Bait.
on bait.
Yeah.
So my go-to lures this time of year are usually just a bigger profile, like like the scented flukes from Z-Man.
Hmm.
What are they, 4 inch?
Yeah, I think it's a 4 inch, kind of like a diesel minnow profile with like a paddle tail.
No, 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 like the fork tail ones, the jerk shads.
Oh, the jerk shads. Yep.
Yeah. So I usually use that on probably a 1/4 ounce head
Okay.
and anything from like new copper penny color to chartreuse and gold. Chartreuse and gold works great 'cause this time of year fishing a lot of dirty water, so it stands out when it hits the bottom.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people talk about, colors and maybe they do or don't matter. So in your opinion, like, do I look at the water color, texture, cleanliness or whatever and make a decision on color according to that? Or am I thinking more about time of day in terms of sunlight?
I would say watercolor.
Okay.
So all my rods that I fish inshore with, they're usually like the white rod with a colored wrap on the eyes. Everyone thinks it's cool, but I use it mostly to see how far I can see in the water. So a lot of times people will see me dipping rods in the water when I slow down the boat. And that's really what I'm assessing which rods I'm giving out to people. If I can see, let's say I have probably the first foot of my rod, I have 4 guides. If I can see the first 4 guides, I'm probably going to go with a little bit darker color or a little bit lighter color. Sorry,
Mhm.
just because I can see it a little bit better and it's not going to get washed out. If it's real dirty, I'm probably going to go with like a pumpkin seed color with like a chartreuse tail or a what is it, black and purple or black and silver.
So it's got some like pretty sharp contrast there in the water. And it's funny, I asked about the lure color and you started to talk about your white rod. And I'm like, where are we going with this? And then you talked about that strategy, sticking the rod in the water. I would have never thought of that. That's pretty genius in terms of being able to determine, what the maybe viz is in the water. Those are some great tips, man. I think, I'm always watching your social media feeds and just about every day that you're out there, we're always seeing a very beautiful dock shot with, whether it's puppy drum, flounder, you guys are out in the bay doing, cobia, spadefish, whatever. So really cool to hear some of these, thought processes that somebody like yourself that's out there every day, what's the old saying, need is something like need is the birth of innovation or whatnot. And you're out there and the next thing you know, you figure out, hey, I can dip my pole in the water and figure out what kind of bait I need to use today.
Yeah, it's just something I've picked up and I've noticed over the years of just throwing a lot of different lures. Because a lot of times I let my charters pick their lures out first thing in the morning. And buddy, I have every color you can imagine. You've seen it personally, you know.
Hmm.
And I've had everything range from like electric chicken to like some clear body with a little bit of sparkle to it. And
Hmm.
I've had it all get eaten. Like if you have 100% confidence, if your favorite color is that electric chicken, throw it all there.
Yeah.
Because if you're constantly switching and then going back to the electric chicken, it it doesn't matter. So just stick with something you know you're confident in.
Yeah, I agree with you. It really does, come back down to confidence because if you're not confident, you might not be fishing it at your same cadence, or you might not be, doing the things that you always do that do typically induce a bite, and so you're kind of like a little off. I'm curious, in your opinion, you fish a lot in the Lynnhaven Inlet, but if I'm in, Rudy or Little Creek, or maybe in up some of the, Eastern Shore, flats and tributaries. Would you say these same principles probably apply in order, in sense of like trying to get, find some fish and get hooked up?
I would say 100%. I mean, I fish up and down the eastern seaboard all year long. We fish a lot down in Florida in the wintertime, and then we fish Eastern Shore, Elizabeth River all winter long. We fish the Elizabeth River a lot in the spring. I do the same thing I do in Lynnhaven.
Okay.
So I see the color of the water. I see the which way the water's moving against the dock. If you got a strong eddy, if you don't have bait, a lot changes when you switch to like wintertime compared to summertime, just because you don't see the bait in the wintertime. You got to have a good transducer and you have to know what you're looking at when you're marking.
Mhm.
Other than that, I mean, everything that you learn all summer long can go pretty much everywhere with you. I learned a lot of this stuff bass fishing.
Interesting. And then it all just kind of translates over. So I got two questions for you, and then we'll jump into how folks can get up with you to book a trip. So first question is, in your opinion, chirp versus traditional sonar, when I'm looking at maybe like your standard Garmin, what's the difference between the two in your opinion?
Your traditional sonar, and don't quote me on this, I'm not a professional, it's just what I've seen. Your traditional sonar is going to show you a lot of scattered marks. So like I firmly believe like big grass piles that are floating through the inlet right now,
Hmm.
that'll show up on there. And then like if you got chirp right underneath it, look at what you think is a really solid bluish mark. And you look at chirp and there's nothing there.
Oh, interesting.
It it wasn't bait, it was probably something else, probably some disturbance. Probably you were moving a little fast. But like let's say like you're sitting over top of like a rock pile or something over there by like the first or second island. You can really see individual marks. Let's say like a drum school or something.
Hmm.
You can really see the individual marks, like almost count how many fish are in the school underneath the boat on your chirp. And on your traditional, it's just going to show you a big glob.
Okay. And the darker, like on the traditional, the darker the red in the middle, is that supposed to kind of imply like the density or maybe the overall size of that fish or thing that I'm marking?
I'm always been told it's like the density of it. So like if you have a hard mark, it's a real solid red.
Okay, that makes sense. And then question number two, I've seen it. I've played around with it a few times. I can't say that I see it make a difference or not, but you probably use it a lot more. Are you a believer in the Procure gels? And if so, do you have a favorite scent or flavor? Do you ever taste them? I'm just kidding.
I mean, I firmly believe it probably doesn't matter. It's a psychological thing. But when those water does get dirty, I do see quite a bit more fish caught with Procure. And I'm not saying like on your top water plugs and stuff. I'm saying on like your swim jigs. Something that's slow rolling through the bottom that could possibly get like we'll get more flounder on our jerk shads and stuff in the summertime because we're using Procure on it. Kind of like a gulp.
Okay. So it's like when the water's a little bit cloudier and they maybe can't necessarily visually go after that bait, but they pick up that little bit of scent and might help them get close enough to where that bait is then a visual target for them.
Yeah, it's like using a live menhaden compared to cutting up that menhaden and using it as cut bait.
Got it.
If you're got a bunch of active fish that are actively feeding on stuff, honestly, you could probably throw whatever you have in the boat at it and catch them. When you got a weird tide or you have a deeper dock or something, like somewhere in the 10, 12 foot range, I think that Pro Cure on the bottom probably helps them zero in on that jig. And I feel like it'll pull them out of structures. Like we'll use it a lot fishing docks. But
Okay.
on the other end of that, probably my favorite one would probably be the mullet and Lynnhaven.
Okay. Well, that's a great tip. And I know, it's middle of the summer. Things are happening, whether it's in the inlet or out on the bay. Obviously, you guys, fish that big old 32 contender. You've also got the bay boat for inshore. So if folks want to get up with you and book a trip to go out on the bay and chase some bay species, or, maybe the weather isn't conducive to get out there and we can jump on the little boat and go inside the inlet, what's going to be the best way for folks to get up with you and book a trip?
You could either find me on Instagram or Facebook, or you can look up my Valley Pro booking address.
All right,
And
perfect.
it'll give you an active calendar and all my rates, and you can book it right off of there, deposit and everything.
Awesome. Yeah. And on the social media, that's Heads and Tails Charter. And then we'll drop a link to that booking calendar here in the show notes. So, Captain Eric, thanks so much for joining us today for that inshore report. That was really insightful, and I learned a lot today. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, man, no problem. I enjoy it.
Awesome, man. Well, guys, that's going to wrap up another great report. We're going to take one more break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about what we learned today. Y'all stick around. GreatDaysOutdoors.com. Great Days Outdoors has been the premier destination for hunters and anglers looking for a comprehensive look into the outdoor lifestyle since 1997. Our stories are crafted by dedicated journalists who live, eat, and breathe all things hunting, fishing, conservation, and land ownership. Check them out at GreatDaysOutdoors.com. All right, guys. Well, welcome to this What Did You Learn segment. This week was great. I got a lot of cool insights hearing from our new contributor, Captain Russ Castinas, aboard the Top Notch. Always great to talk to our friend Colton North with Litigator Sport Fishing and Captain Eric Myers with Heads and Tails. Learned a lot of cool things this week, and it's got me excited to maybe try some new things. And of course, like always, if you're not from around here or you're just getting into this fishery, a great option is always to call one of these guys and book a trip and go out and enjoy a great day catching fish with some of these expert captains. Switching gears, we've got the ODU Cobia tournament coming up in the next 48 hours. And I want to have a little bit of a safety talk about boat safety and preparation and, of course, communication. Some of you might remember back on June the 15th, there was an incident with a boat that capsized. Fortunately, there was no loss of life, but it very well could have been a tragedy if some circumstances didn't play out the way that they did. Fortunately, the captain and his crew were able to get communication out and get rescued relatively quickly, but it certainly could have gone the other way. When I spoke with him, he shared some nuggets of wisdom that I want to share with you guys. So I'm going to read a few things to you and just would like you to consider prioritizing safety ahead of your next fishing trip, and especially during these tournaments. So first and foremost, always have a safety talk before leaving the dock. Ensure that every person on board knows exactly where the safety gear is, especially making sure that your life jackets are actually accessible. Make sure that everybody knows how to operate the boat, including start stop, and of course, how to change control stations. So if you've got a tower boat, oftentimes the upstairs station has to be in neutral before there can be a switch to downstairs. So in addition to the safety lanyard, you definitely want to make sure that folks know how to change those control stations. Make sure everybody on board knows how to operate and use the VHF radio, understands how to turn it on and use it, and call for help on the channels, especially channel 16 if you need to get a distress call out. It's also very good for everybody on board to just, while you're out fishing, be aware of your surroundings in relationship to a map and landmarks. So, for example, if you are, northeast of the CY buoy up, working up the Baltimore Channel, be aware of how many, buoy markers you are up past it. Be aware how far away from Cape Charles or how far away from Hampton or, the second island. Just be aware of where you are at all times so that in the moment that you perhaps need to get a distress call out, that you've only got a short time, you can tell them exactly where you are or as close to exactly where you are, because every second will count when it comes to giving rescuers accurate information. Know your limits. If you feel uncomfortable in the fishing conditions, reevaluate the situation. No fish is worth your life. Change of direction, redistribute weight, get out of the tower to run through unsafe conditions, or perhaps even consider calling it early. It's just not worth it to win a trophy, win a a prize or catch a big fish. Your life or the life of those on board with you is just not worth it. If you've got a tournament where perhaps it's 2 days and one day is maybe conditions that exceed your boat's capability. Maybe you've got a 23, 24-foot boat with a tower and it's going to be 3 to 5 foot waves. Maybe only fish one day. Make the right call, do the safe thing. And always wear your safety lanyard if it's able to be hooked to your belt. It's definitely inconvenient, but it can definitely save your life. In the example that we had from June 15th, the captain shared that they all went overboard with full gear on, boots. Their boat was still in gear. And had the boat not capsized and gone another 200-300 yards, they may not have survived because they wouldn't have been able to get to the boat to hold on to it until the rescuers arrived. Like he said, everything happens so fast, you almost don't have any time to prepare. Consider wearing an inflatable PFD, especially fishing on rough days alone or maybe all the time. Consider carrying your EPIRB or PLB. A lot of times we're in the bay, we don't think that we need these until we really, really need them. But those 5 to 10 minutes of difference can be whether you live or die. So having one of those on board can certainly be critical in a life-threatening situation. Maybe consider carrying an inReach on your person. You may not have time to call on the radio, or you may not have cell service in certain parts of the bay or the ocean side. So having that inReach can also be critical to living or dying. Make sure that all of your safety gear is accessible. He says that he can't stress this enough. We all have life jackets that are tangled up in our anchor locker somewhere or under our console. That even includes that little orange box with our, whistles and flares. Often they get buried under our tackle bags. And if we really needed them, it would be a hot mess trying to get to them in a pinch. It's very easy to think that this won't happen to you, or if it did, you'd have time to do this or that. But the reality is, according to his account of actually experiencing going in and almost dying, you won't have time to think. You won't have time to coach. You won't have time to find things. You just won't have time. So be prepared and prepare your crew to do the same thing. We've all fished these bad, sporty days many, many times, but it only takes one sequence of a wave coming at the wrong time with the boat pitching and the wind pushing and the weight wrong. And the next thing you know, boom, tragedy could strike. And we've all got that story where we've come close to it, maybe getting caught in a storm or running aground or almost sinking. But you never really do think twice about what you could have done to prevent it until it actually happens to you. So take this firsthand experience as a wise warning to anyone out there that's going to be fishing, recreationally or especially in these tournaments. Know your limits, evaluate the situation, have your safety talks, and above all else, prioritize your safety. Guys, I can't thank you enough for tuning in for that. I want to thank this captain for sharing his wisdom with us. I'm definitely going to be, wearing my PFD on those sporty days. I've got one of those lap style ones that you can clip around. It doesn't make you hot. I learned that from listening to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report a couple years back, where a gentleman went in the water for almost 8 hours, and it was only 80 degrees in the water, but he was almost hypothermic by the time he was rescued. And he was having to, tread water and hold on for dear life. So those little lap PFDs with the manual inflate can certainly be a great option. I'll drop that in the show notes. You can get them on Amazon. Guys, wish y'all a lot of luck this weekend. Hope everyone is safe, has fun, and we'll look forward to talking to y'all next week. So that's going to wrap it up this week. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, to get your free AFTCO Camo Sunglasses Cleaning Cloth, just text the acronym LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get your promo code and be added to our email list so we can send you the new show each week. You guys keep whacking them and be safe out there.